My name is Monk Rowe, and we are in Clearwater Beach. I'm really pleased to have bassist Frank Tate with me here today, and just heard a fantastic set of music with some of your cohorts, Dan Barrett and Howard Alden.
I'd have to share your enthusiasm for it. We haven't worked together in a long time.
Didn't sound like it.
Well, we rehearsed this afternoon.
Okay.
So, yeah, we get a little of the rust off,
Yeah.
Scrape some barnacles. And such.
But those are some kind of complex arrangements, but they, you pull them off pretty easily. Do you play differently with that group than?
I don't know. I try never to play differently. I just try to play, and it either works or it doesn't. I mean, I can temper my style to a certain degree. For example, last night, I don't know if you heard the Dick Hyman set. I mean, Dick said, look, he came to us before we played, he said, let's take a different approach to this. Let's play this very loosely and let it go where it goes. And there's certainly the structure. We're playing within the tune.
Yeah.
But so I will go to a certain length, but I don't try and do things that I can't do. So I'm usually called because of the way I play.
Yeah.
I play a certain style, and so I don't really have to think about it. They already know what they're getting, So.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fairly ambiguous direction anyway. Let's play this fairly loose.
Well, yeah, but I was thinking the other day, it just amazes me with really good players how much really works. Monk made a record with Pee Wee Russell.
Yeah.
And Bernard Purdy's on a Louis Armstrong record. And I don't see people trying to change their style. They just go do what they do, and it just when I think about it, it really is pretty amazing how much does work.
Yeah.
If they're good, really, really fine players.
Yeah. I guess you just have to listen.
And if not, then nothing works.
Tell me, you grew up in Washington?
Yeah, I grew up in Arlington. I was born in Washington, and I grew up across the river in Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah.
And I went off to Greensboro College and was a business major.
Really?
And when I was 19, I started sitting in on trumpet, which was my first instrument. And I sat in, and there were some clubs, and this was a time when you could go around to little joints here and there and sit in and play, and I got some experience that way. And then after I'd finished college, I'd graduated, and I was 23 years old. The guy that started me in the business on trumpet, a man named Bert Massengale, who just had his 90th birthday, switched me to bass when I was 23. I hung around down there, and I started playing bass, and I moved back to Washington and was working days in song stereos and color TVs. And when I was 27, I on April 1st,
you have to remember that.
Yeah, that's a date which will live in infamy. I left the day world for the last time and started playing full time.
Left the day world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a huff.
work on your
stormed out on them.
Let's work on your nightclub tan now.
Yeah, right.
So you came to the instrument at least kind of late in comparison to some people.
Oh,
did you come to the music late though, or was it always?
No, I had Art Hode's records when I was 5 years old. My older brother and Bob Hode's, Art's son, were in first grade together in West Hempstead, Long Island. We lived there for a very brief period of time when I was like 3, 4, and 5, and so my father and Art Hode's and my mother and Art and Thelma Hode's, they all became friends.
I see.
And so I had these 78s. I have a few of them left. Way Down Yonder, New Orleans is on one side, and a tune called Save It Pretty Mama is on the other side. I can't believe they got it printed back then. It's not a vocal.
Okay.
So, I didn't pay much attention to it until, I had some Hackett records, believe it or not. And I had an Art Tatum Trio record, which my mother bought for me to give to my step-grandfather for Christmas, and about 2 days later, he gave it back to me.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was a record with Slam Stewart and Everett Barksdale. And it was a 10-inch LP, and I had it stolen in the 70s. I had a whole footlocker. It was my prized possession. It's gone.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Was Slam doing the...
Oh, yeah,
the thing?
Boeing and the whole...
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And so, but I don't know, when I was in high school, that's when I really got the bug. And a buddy of mine took me to hear Dizzy Gillespie one night. He was adjudicating a festival at Georgetown University. The second place band was a 6-piece bebop band led by Paul Winter.
Whoa.
Yeah, like a 6-piece, like an Art Blakey style band, and they came in second. And then Dizzy played, and I'd never heard Dizzy on record. And being a trumpet player, I mean, I am sure that my hair literally stood on end when he started playing for the first time. And I of course immediately raced out and bought everything. And then it was Miles and all the saxophone players so the music I was listening to when I entered as a listener were the people that were hot at the time: Miles, Cannonball, Wes Montgomery, Wynton Kelly, Wayne Shorter, those kind of people. I had to go back and find out about Louis. To me, Louis meant nothing to me at the time. You know, it's just an old guy. You know.
Yeah, I guess that's usually the way it happens.
Well, I'm sure it is. But once I got interested in the earlier music, then I really went back and took a good, long, hard look at it and got emotionally involved in it. And then it became part of me, just like the music of the 60s, you know, the Wes Montgomery things. That I still get out and listen to all that stuff. I love that music of that period.
Did the rock and roll of the time, upcoming rock and roll people affect you at all?
I never listened to them.
Okay.
I flunked the Beatles test one time. I couldn't name all four of them. I figured it out later. Yeah, I think I left out George Harrison, of all people, the bass player. Someone asked me.
No, McCartney's a bass player.
Well, see, there you have it.
You're still flunking it.
Right. Well, I'm proud of that. That's a badge. I'll wear that proudly.
Okay.
I never. After the Platters and the Clovers and the Drifters and Fats Domino and a few bands and Chuck Berry and bands like that. By the time I got to college, I did dance parties and stuff, you know. But I was already nicknamed Felonious Monk by a friend of mine laid that on me when I was a sophomore.
I'm sorry, that's my nickname. You can't.
I guess it is at that. Yeah. But I used to go, when I was in high school, I was right outside of Washington where the Howard Theater is, and I used to tell my mother and father, I'm going to the theater tnanite. You know, they thought I was going to go see a Roy Rogers, probably going to hear Shorty Rogers or somebody. I heard Nancy Wilson when she was maybe 21, right after she had done the 2 Capitol albums. The one, and
Go ahead.
She was 8 feet tall and weighed 115 pounds of pure dynamite in a floor-length blue dress, and the curtain opened and the audience went, and she slayed them. And I heard Red Fox, I heard Mom's Maybelle, I heard Quincy Jones's big band, I heard Miles with, I think, Cannonball and Coltrane, and I'm pretty sure Bill Evans, but my memory of the Sidemen back then, this is at a time when I was still trying to figure out where Train stopped and Cannonball came in. I was still trying to sort out the difference between the sound of a tenor and an alto, because I was just, you know. But I'd show up 2 hours early to go hear. And even later on, when I was legal to get into bars, I'd go to hear Miles. I'd show up at 8 o'clock. I'd be at the table at 8 for a 9 o'clock set. You know, I was so infected by the whole thing.
I'm a real Cannonball nut, and that record was it. I mean, perfect.
Yeah, I thought that was the best material she ever did. You know, the record companies say, get into somebody.
And she took heat for it, too, she told me.
I'm sure she did. Cannonball must have taken heat for Mercy, 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 and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know the record business, you know. I don't know how these characters operate at the desk, you know, but, you know, these guys, they get an advance, and then they've got to sell records, and Cannonball started doing all that pop music, and Nancy Wilson did a record of, well, there was a tune on there called "It's All Over Mr. Walker, I Don't Want the New York Secretary's Life," country and western tune.
Wow.
So, I mean, I doubt that was of you know. But I heard her win, you
Yeah.
know, and
And you saw her win.
I saw her, yeah, sure did.
Now, let me just pick up here.
Okay.
So in the Washington club scene, you were really getting exposed to a great variety of players. Is that a fair statement?
There were several really fine clubs. First of all, Bohemian Caverns, and the late, great Tony Taylor, who owned this place, he used to let me in there when I was underage, and you could start drinking in Washington when you were 18.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd make sure that I didn't get in too much trouble. Yeah. You know, he kept me on a pretty short leash. He let me in because he knew I was just totally crazed about the music. And you know, I was many nights I was the only white person in the club. Maybe within 5 miles. The way the scene in Washington and Northern Virginia and all that was back in early 1960. You know, those were the days of segregated high schools.
Yeah.
So, and I was going. Tony would see that I didn't get out of line, you know.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of people at Roland Kirk. Mm-hmm. Saw Coltrane's quartet a little later on in the 62 or 3 when I was in college at that point. And Blues Alley was there, and I used to go over to Blues Alley after work every night. And I heard all kinds of people there. And I befriended the owner at the time, a man named Bill Cannon. Colonel Bill Cannon, U.S. Army retired. Colonel Cannon, okay,
really?
owned a jazz club. He was a very decent guy, an ex-pilot, Second World War bomber pilot, I think. And he hired me once and asked me to lead the house band. And I had no name experience of any kind, and I hired a drummer and a piano player, and a drummer's still a good friend of mine, Tom Bailey, who lives up near me, and we didn't know anything. The first people we worked with was Wild Bill. Wild Bill Davison came in, and then Bobby Hackett, Herbie Green came in, Zoot came in, Al Cohn came in, Anita O'Day. That was fun. It's different.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, she's nothing if she's not interesting. And she had a good week though. She had some trouble there. She had a drummer once who quit on a Tuesday night. He said, I think his name was John Poole. He said, I just can't stand any more of these 2-day weeks. She's going to get fired by Tuesday, but
really?
She had settled down. She was
a little strung out sometimes, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Yeah. She had a very strong personality. Great singer. Oh, please, you know. And Teddy King sang there. Maxine Sullivan. And I worked with all these people, and I was like a sponge at this point. I mean, they were bringing in music, and I, at this point, was just barely learning how to read. And I was trying to figure out what a C7th was, and
is that right? And you're playing behind these people.
I had a good ear.
Wow.
You know, I mean, I knew when a chord was a minor chord or a major chord without having to be told. But it was at this point that I started getting into the text, and was learning to read and figuring out changes, learning what chord symbols, what they really meant, and what all that fruit salad, you know, the +11 and all that stuff dangling off the end of a chord meant, and what to do with it. And,
right.
And I stayed there about 1.5 years, and then Bobby Hackett asked me to come on the road with him to a place named Dunphy's Hyannis Resort, which we immediately named Dummy's High-Handed Resort. It was run by a bunch of gangsters at the time.
Really?
Well, not gangsters, but we were going to be there 5 years. We lasted about 5 minutes. We all got fired. And the night we got fired, we were there a couple of months maybe.
Yeah.
You know? And Bobby had his first major diabetic attack, and it really set him back. And he never really got well from it. This was in '74, and he died in '76, so he never really got over his first diabetic attack, and it finally took him away. But the night we got fired, a man named Warren Maddows, who's left us, he owned a place down the road on the Cape. This was down in, I guess, West Dennis, and a place called the Columns. It was West Dennis. And Dave McKenna was working there, and he asked me, he said, Howard, my ship had sunk. We were fired. I had a girlfriend living with me at the time. I had no money, and I'd committed to a summer rental, and she had left her job for the summer and taken a leave of absence. And here we were on the Cape, and about a week after we got settled in, we were all fired. And the same night he asked, this man Warren Meadows asked me how would I feel about spending the rest of the summer working with Dave McKenna. Well, he pulled me down from the cieling. My head was stuck in it. My ship rose to the surface and sailed off. And I spent better part of 4 years working with Dave.
Wow.
While everybody else was down at Berkeley. I was a little old for that anyhow. They were down there playing modal and learning scales and stuff. I was learning tunes like "Ship Without a Sail" and all this stuff. And Dave never called a tune. He never gave a tempo. He didn't do anything. He just sat down and started playing, and you were either on board or you weren't. And it was just night after night after night. For 1 year, we started in May and finished on New Year's Eve. That was the summer season. We just one night we played duo. I can remember one night we played duo in the room on a Wednesday night. A cold, rainy, late October night for about 13 people. Sat in the lounge, and they stayed from the first note to the last, and you could hear the ice cubes melt.
Wow.
And it was so intense, and this went on just night after night, just tunes, and then I really was a sponge at this point. I was really trying to soak up everything I could, and I was living in New York at the time. I had a $150 a month apartment, and I'd just go on June 1st and lock the door and turn off the electricity and come back in January or whatever. And I was also working with Marian McPartland at that time, so I was juggling a fairly serious calendar, and that was a wonderful gig for me. So I had that gig when I moved to New York. So instead of coming to New York looking for a job, I came to New York working with Marian, with her trio.
How'd you get hooked up with her?
Well, I met her in Washington, and she told me, she and I are still very close. I talk to her a good bit, and I see her when I can, and we're fast friends. And she told me, she said, you basically need to get out of Washington, is what she said to me. She said, if you come to New York, I'll put you to work. And I did, and she did. She was good to her word, and we went to work in Rochester at the Round Towner Motor Inn on Route 252A, Henrietta Boulevard.
I've been there.
Why I can remember that, I'll never know, but I guess because it had the whole thing made such a profound impression upon me. Jules Moss was playing drums at the time, and then later Ted Moore, who wound up playing marimba with the Brazilian Symphony. Great musician, but I went to work with Marian without a rehearsal. It was like McKenna. We didn't have a talk through. We went up there and started playing. And things would start to evolve arrangement-wise. And of course, she already had her arsenal of certain things, but beyond that, she was down for anything. And if she didn't like it, she'd shoot you a look, but we were trying all kinds of stuff, and
like you said, that was your Berkeley.
Yeah, I mean, that and the Dave McKenna gig. I mean, really.
You can't get any better.
And Marian's tunes, her choice of tunes, like Dave's, was exquisite. I mean, we were doing Strayhorn and she'd sketch a lot of stuff out for me later on, and she had a real fast hand, and she'd write out changes, and she's a very fine writer. She's written all kinds of great tunes. One of which I recorded, Twilight World.
Twilight World, yeah.
It was a title tune for a limited issue CD I did. Talk about a vanity project. Every dime of it was mine, and I think I sold about 5 of them, and I gave away about 400.
I know how that works.
I used it I was just trying to, unabashed self-aggrandizement. Maybe that's not the word, but I was just trying to promote the trio, and of course we never got a single gig, but I got the date out, and it got my name out, and that was the point of it.
Well, when I look at the list of other people you've been with, unfortunately most of them are gone.
My fault. I killed them all. It's really awful. It's kind of embarrassing. I mean, they were all going to live forever if it weren't for me, right?
Yeah, right.
But the truth of the matter is that I was lucky enough, and I was very young, and these were some very old people, and I got in on the tail end of some really great careers. Venuti, Hackett, Zoot. I stayed around with Zoot for a while. I worked with Zoot in New York. I worked with Zoot up until right before he died. And did a couple of recordings with him. Jimmy Rolls. I got to work with Teddy Wilson some. That was interesting.
How about Denny Goodman? What's it like to work
with him once? He hated me. He walked into the rehearsal looking at me like I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Looking at me out of the side of my face. I should have right then and there said, Benny, thanks. It's another time. But he had 3 gigs for me. And I've got to preface this by saying that, Benny was at times a very odd duck, but I'm not calling him on his musicality. Don't misunderstand me. I mean, I fully appreciate everything that he did and his worth as a player. And a lot of guys liked him. They got along with him. They understood. Even some guys had a lot of trouble with him and still liked him. And that's understandable. But he had it in for me from when he walked in. We rehearsed at Mel Lewis's house, and Benny came in glaring at me, and so we were supposed to go to New Haven, and Benny was paying $200 in town and $300 out of town. And when the gig was over, Lauren Schoenberg was working for Benny then, and Lauren called me up the next day, and he said, Frank, I have bad news. And I said, well, I know I'm off the band. He said, no, it gets worse. And he had been, championing me. He was trying to get me on the band, and of course, Benny despised me from, I guess it was my East Falls Church, Virginia Protestant look or something. I don't know what it was, but we were oil and water. And Lauren said, no, it gets worse. I was writing you out a check for $300 because you were in New Haven last night, 75 miles out of New York, and Benny comes by and says, oh, no, this is New Haven. He says, that's in town. So Benny still owes me $100. I guess I lose, right?
I guess not. You don't go to get it.
No, I'm not. But I'm sorry it didn't work out because I felt like I would have been a good bass player for him. Would have been a good situation for me. I thought I could have done the job. I knew the music, and I'm sure I would have learned a whole lot. I mean, Mel Lewis and Britt Woodman were on that band that night, and I'd forgotten some other really fine people. And I would love to have stuck around for a while. First of all, I could have made a lot of money, and because he was still working pretty much. So, but it wasn't meant to be, and Benny's got my $100.
I think it probably got a few other people's too.
I don't know.
Everybody seems to have. He was
playing a concert one night with Zoot Sims, and people threw some money up on the stage, and Benny bent down and picked up a dollar bill, and Zoot snatched it right out of his hand and said, I need that more than you do.
I see you've worked with some great singers too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby Short recently.
Bobby, the singer to end all singers. Oh, I've been with him full-time for 4.5 years. I replaced a guy named Beverly Peer, a man that had been with the Chick Webb Band. Oof. He was 84 when he resigned in the middle of the night.
Really?
He couldn't get through the second set. He was very ill, and Bobby called me up, and Bobby said, what are you doing? I said, I had rehearsed with him that day and the day before. Rehearsed the show because Beverly was on the brink. And Bobby said, he called me at 9 o'clock, said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm in my pajamas watching TV. And Bobby said, well, you better get your ass into your tuxedo and get in here because it's starting the second show and it's going to be televised. It's for Brazilian television, and I had music spread. Bobby didn't like music on the stand, and of course I memorized it all as quickly as I could and got rid of it. But so I had, and these like opus, these medleys,
yeah.
and pages flopping around and everything. But I got through it, and Beverly died within 5 or 6 weeks. He died in mid-January of I came in kind of like around 5th or 6th of December of '96, and Beverly didn't stay around very long, but he worked right up until the end.
Yeah.
He was with Bobby for 38 years, and I told Bobby, that night I came on, I said, hey, I want 38 years. And I did the math and realized it would make me 91, and I told him, he said, well, what do you think that's going to make me? So I said, okay, well, let's try for 10, and he said, okay. So I'm not quite halfway through the 10-year plan, and then I'm going to renegotiate with him again. And he's doing fine.
Does he go from coast or from Europe?
He lives he has a place in the south of France.
Oh,
I believe it's called Mougins. My French is kind of not real strong, but he has it's referred to as a villa, and I've seen pictures of it, and it is, and he's got orchards. He's got 3.5 acres and a pool, and he's got a nice apartment in New York. You know, he's had a heck of a career. Started very early. He had some lean times, but he went out to L.A. when he was 18 and just sort of went out there and placed himself on the A-list, where he's been ever since. You know, he worked for the right people, played the right music, was very smart, spoke French, and when he was in high school. He went on the road when he was 11 with a tutor. He said, I had to become a man when I was 11, and then when I was 14, he said, I went back to Danville, Illinois. I had to start being a boy again. Because somebody would say something about somebody, and Bobby would say, oh, I know him. And they'd say, oh, you're such a big shot. And Bobby said, I had to forget about all that and go back to school and be a high school boy again. And then he went out to California, bought himself a big black Cadillac convertible, riding around in Hollywood when he was 18 or 19, maybe 20, in a convertible. He's extremely interesting, and talent like from day one. Tremendous ears. Hears everything. Totally self-taught. And he's a joy to work for.
Neat. What's it like in this particular time period to make a living as a jazz musician?
Well, I have a wife with a real job, so it's not bad.
Okay.
No, my wife works for Doubleday Books. She's what's her title? I guess it's the director of promotional art. But I mean, she works, and I stay busy. I don't. Yeah. I've always worked. I knew going in that I wasn't going to make any money. I make a living and I work, and it's 2 hours a day. So I get my golf in by day, and I'm not into 60-hour weeks. My father did that.
Really?
Yeah, he lived to the ripe old age of 61. Forget it. I'm very happy, and I'm very, very happy when I think about my circumstance, because I came at it from a very funny angle. I had no education in music as a kid except trumpet lessons, and I didn't have any formal education on string bass. I watched bass players. I figured I got a hold of the Samantha book. Then I had a couple of teachers, and got the bend out of my wrist and got my arm straightened out and my fingering, and I watched good bass players and watched how they played and why they held their body a certain way, and it started making sense. If your wrist is cocked, it's like a support beam with a bend in it. This makes more sense than this, and things like that, and this makes more sense than this. This is stronger, and I started figuring it out, and I mostly relied on my ear, and so the point was, and I was 27 before I started playing full time. Yeah, and had a serious bout with alcohol that lasted from the time I was 16 till I was 30, And it wasn't really until when I went on the wagon in 1973, within 6 months, I was out of Washington and off working with Hackett and then McKenna and Marian McPartland. And so when I dried out, everything good started happening to me at once. And so coming at it from the angle that I came at, I sort of crashed the party, and sort of late in life too. I mean, to have, made it, in this business, it still surprises me when I think about it that I'm doing what I want to do in New York, and it's what I've been doing for 30 years. The same thing. I don't teach, I don't write, I didn't never want to do any of that. All I ever wanted to do was be a bass player and a performer, and that's exactly what has happened. So I caught a big break,
Yeah.
Yeah,
knock on wood, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think of some of the young players coming up on the instrument?
Oh, I hate them. Oh.
Yeah.
The bass players, yeah. Well, I hated the way Milt Hinton played, but if you were a bass player trying to make a living in this business, you'd hate him too. Oh, I think it's fabulous. That's the flip answer, but
yeah.
I mean, there seems to be more going on now than ever. But with the exception of some of these jazz parties and stuff, it's kind of like sports. It's almost like it's a kid's game, I see myself looking at, I don't know what down the road. I don't see, in these jazz parties, how long are they going to go on?
Right. When you look at the audience.
The audience, yeah, well, listen to the audience. And my late brother, who died a couple of years ago, would be about 60 or 61 now. And when he died a couple of years ago, he rode around in his car listening to 50s R&B. People 55 years old now talk about Grand Funk Railroad or whoever, They don't know. People crowding 60 don't know, they've had no exposure to this music. They don't know beans about it. And that really doesn't bode very well for us. But now modern music with this post-Wynton Marsalis, invasion of, it's not an invasion, it's just people have gotten away from other kinds of music and are going back. There's a lot of great jazz being played in all over the world, concerts, and a lot of these guys are doing very well in the business too, and all more power to them. It seems like there's a whole bunch of young people out here now with a lot of business savvy. They're taking care of the business end of the music as well, and some of them have learned it in school. They've taken courses in how to manage a career, and well, I missed that one. But I think what's happening is great. I'm not really crazy about a lot of what I hear. I think a lot of what I'm hearing is extremely derivative, and it's from everybody. I don't hear a lot of new. I mean, we're fresh out of Charlie Parker's and Coltrane's, and sometimes I think about music and I think it's been covered. And I hear about things like ska bands and world music, and I don't want to know from any of that. I only want to know about jazz music. I'm not interested in the confluence of any other. That's just me personally. I don't, keep your music out of jazz. That's I'm sorry. That's an old person's point of view, but.
You don't want to hear jazz and Irish rigs, reels together.
No,
yeah.
I don't. I really don't. And if I did, I'd probably like it. I'd rather not hear it and not like it.
Yeah. Okay, here's a hard question to answer for some people, but when something, even like at these parties, when you're thrown together with all these different people, sometimes it might really swing, and sometimes it might not. Is it possible? Is it possible to put into words why things do and don't?
Well, not really being a student of the history and all. I don't know why, and I don't know why bands will work one night and not another. I'm talking about the same band. Some things are so much better. And somebody said to Miles Davis one night, he says, man, he says, you sound beautiful tonight. And Miles said, well, maybe you're just listening good tonight. Maybe you're having a good night. And I mean, so I don't, no, his point was, maybe it sounds good to you because you're in a good place. And when an audience, when you get enough people in an audience that are really in a good place, they'll send something across the divide to you, and you start sharing it back and forth, and they start to pick up a little enthusiasm, and you realize, hey, they're actually hearing this, and maybe we better play a little better, and it's interesting how it happens. But again, most things at these jazz parties, these people that work these jazz parties make these things work. If they couldn't or didn't or wouldn't, they wouldn't be asked back. So we have to get up there and look like we're having the time of our lives. And if you appear to be enjoying yourself, lo and behold, sometimes you actually will, and you will start spreading the joy and the enthusiasm, and it will make the band work better, but some things are just really hard. And the good news is most of the time the audience isn't quite sure when something really goes wrong. Did you ever put a needle down in the middle of a record, or flip on the radio in the middle of a jazz chorus, and you don't know what planet these people are on? A lot of times, non-players, I love to know what they hear. So it's the funny thing is, when something is really, really good, they know it. If it's bad, something wasn't quite right. You know, I mean, yeah, the drummer was in 5/4 all night, or you know, they don't know that, but they're not sure why it isn't working real well. But when something like the Oldenburg Quintet, that set we just did a few minutes ago, everybody in the room knew that was spot on, and there was no question about it. And you know, that's funny. It's not hard to figure when something's really good, but when it isn't. And the answer to your question is yes. Some things just don't work too well. You put on your game face, and you get out there and appear to be having the time of your life and sell it any way you can, because attitude shows from a mile away. You know, if you're up there, oh man, I'm so bugged with this, and have that kind of a like bebop mentality. With apologies to all my dear friends who play bebop, including me, who I do as well. But you know of what I speak. You have to, and this is something I learned from Bobby Short, but how to sell it. He went out one night on a blustery Tuesday in May in a rainstorm, second show. There was 4 people in the room, and he went out there and launched a full frontal assault on these 4 people. The whole 9 dialogue, the patter, every tune. I mean, and I just sat back and I said, Frank Tate, I says, man, you ought to take a lesson from this, and don't ever forget what happened up here tonight, because this is why he is where he is, and maybe it's why I'm a side man, you know. But well, you know, there aren't too many slots for Bobby Shorts in this world, but he's in his slot for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is, well, it's his talent, of course, but making things work when he doesn't feel well. When it's like when he had this other bass player who was so sick on the stand, and you know, you just have to like get really focused and go for it.
Well, it's a great statement about his entertainment value as well as his talent. But when you said bebop mentality,
oh, that's just no. I retract that.
Yeah, but okay. The idea that the music itself was enough, like I don't need to try to entertain you.
Yeah. Dizzy knew better. Dizzy always knew better. He knew where the money was, and that was in sending people home happy. They go home happy, they'll come back. Al Haig never, I worked with him for a couple of weeks. He'd finish a tune by like, in a almost an effort to keep people from applauding. It's like there was a wall up between, well, he was an unusual guy. Brilliant talent, but, didn't know the first thing about entertaining. And Zoot, who, hey, good night, thank you. People loved him. He didn't say anything. He was, Felix Grant, the disc jockey, used to talk about him. He said, he's so much fun to watch. He was also one of the funniest people on the planet without ever trying to, nothing was ever strained with him. He was genuinely interesting. And boy, did he have a hard, people would line out in front of a truck for him, his fans.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And people still talk more about Zoot than anybody, and people miss him. I miss Zoot Sims more than anybody I can think of. I think about him all the time because of his personality. And he was loaded a lot of the time, and sometimes he was real mean and hard to get along with, and other times a strange, delightful guy.
Yeah.
The best saxophone player you could ever dream of.
Pretty much intuitive musician.
I think so, yeah. He, at one point, was a very good reader. I mean, he was working in Woody's band.
Yeah.
And now, like all good readers, I mean, there were some people, and always have been people in bands that couldn't read very well, but could hear it and see it, and that would be enough. You put it up there so to remind you what to play, and their musicianship would rule the day, and they could keep the gig because Stan used to read something once and never look at it again. Stan Getz.
Oh. They
used to say that he had a mind like a steel trap about music. They said he'd give him a complicated part and he'd play it once and put it away. When he was with Woody's band, he never had the book out.
Oh.
Now, I wasn't there. I didn't see any of this, so I don't know, and I only worked with him once, but
Can you recall one of your worst dates ever?
How much time you got? I've had some embarrassing moments. The first night that the Alden Barrett Quintet worked, Chuck Wilson had to send in a sub. he had something he couldn't get out of it. Jerry Dodgen came in, and Jerry made the rehearsal, and Jerry had written a tune called Butter, dedicated to Quentin Jackson. And I had a bunch of parts of it around, and I had like two pages of two-part. I had 2 copies of page 1 and 2 copies of page 2, and I put 1 and 1 together and taped them together and put them up on the bandstand. And it was the first night of the existence of the band. And I got to the bottom, I went back up to letter A, and the tune blew up in midair. It fell apart like a house of cards, and we stumbled like a 2-legged racehorse to the finish line, and crawled across on our face and finished. And Jerry Dodgen turned around and looked at us and looked at mostly at me and said, "Thanks, guys, that was beautiful, just perfect." Big smile on his face, and we were all laughing. That was pretty horrible. There have been things like that.
Yeah.
But I haven't had precious few gigs that I really despised. There have been a few. I mean, there's circumstances will, somebody in the audience, especially if you're doing a party for somebody, it's a private party, and you're, fortunately for me, all of those now, I'm hired, and I go out and I work private parties with Howard Alden and people like Bobby Short, because they want us. They don't want a band. They want this band.
Okay.
And so we're known going in, and so there's none of this, hey, you guys go through the kitchen. Most of the gigs I play, I'm part of the party, if I want to be. Yeah. And so I don't have that problem much anymore. And there were some gigs that I've been on that were just misery, but it's only 4 hours a night max, and it's over. How bad can it be? And all gigs end. I mean, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks somewhere, and it's over. I've had some problems with some temperamental people and things, and they can really get underneath your skin. And it's too bad because I've seen really, really fine musicians wreck gigs. Guys that ought to know better. I say guys, people. Singers, men, women, that ought to know better and ought to understand the psychology of what makes a band work well. You don't start a fight with somebody in your band. And Buddy Rich was used to, like, there's a tape floating around of him railing on the band. These are a bunch of 20-year-olds that he robbed out of Berkeley, and they're great players all. And he just attacked them on the bus one night. And I'd been hearing about this tape.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
And I was all excited. I wanted to hear it. And I listened to like 3 seconds of it, and I said, I don't know what this is, but it's not fun. It can't be fun for these guys. And it was really embarrassing. And he could have, all he had to do was say, because they all revered him, and he's like such a superior player. All he had to do was say, yeah, guys, that was just fantastic tonight. They would have been even better the next night. They were all like 20 and 21, very impressionable, you know, and that's not even an age thing. I mean, compliments, you know, to a guy who's playing can really change the whole. And I worked with, one night when I was working with Zoot, we had been to Belfast, and I played on a strange bass. It's now a bass that I own. I bought it from the guy. But it was really big and difficult for me to play at the time. It had a big string length, and it was very wide and hard. And Zoot commented at the time that he says, well, you got some intonation troubles there. And I said, well, Zoot, I'm using a borrowed bass. He says, yeah, I guess you are. And then a couple of weeks later in Chicago, I was back on my own instrument at the time, and we'd been playing steadily, and he laid a compliment on me that stuck with me to this day. And I mean, I got off the elevator and walked down to my room 3 feet off the floor, you know, and I was in my mid-30s then, you know, it wasn't like it wasn't child psychology he was using on me, you know. So I just, why wreck a gig when you know, his comment about the intonation was well taken. He wasn't trying to start a fight with me, but he had some tapes of it. And he said, hey, you know, this is something you need to look into. And I did. I thought, it made me think about it more. But he never went on a rant or you know. Bobby never does either. Bobby can get angry. Everybody can. He gets angry, and then he gets over and gets on with the next piece of business. Something bothers him, he'll let you know. That's the end of it. He's very fair like that, and he makes it clear that he's forgotten about it, and you know, after it's over, and it doesn't happen but once in a blue moon anyhow. So,
what's it like working with Ruby?
The best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss him because I was in his trio for 2-3 years. We rehearsed first time up at my house in Croton-on-Hudson, and Howard brought Ruby up, and Ruby and I had never played together. We're in my little study, and Howard's like, you know, he's swinging like mad. Ruby's playing, and he's going, oh yeah, and I knew immediately that he was digging it, and that trio was so good. We were so together there for a while. We made some nice records and did we did some good gigs and concerts, and it was really, really sensational. And Ruby's at his best on the bandstand. That's the time that he enjoys the most. Everything else is marking time with him, waiting to get on the bandstand from as best I can figure him out. I mean, I think it's what he really lives for.
I see.
And he's passionately involved with it while it's happening. And he has a knack of leading. He led a group with 7 or 8 musicians last night, made them sound like they'd been on the road. He's directing traffic, pointing to this guy and that guy, and working out things while it's and he's like really devil-may-care attitude about he'll go for anything, and when he goes for it, he gets it. He goes way down in the bottom of the horn like nobody can. His lower register is and that's tough sledding down there. the fingerings are all awkward. Those are the hardest fingerings. The bottom part of the horn are the ones where you got to use 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, and it's very heavy and cumbersome, the fingering. And he's just down there wailing in the lower register. He's fearless.
Great to hear that about him.
He's 74, and I shouldn't comment on his health, but except to say that I don't think he's not doing so well. And everybody says, well, if he's got a breathing problem, how can he play the trumpet? Well, if you look at the trumpet, the bell is this big around, but there's not a column of air coming out. The column of air is this big around going into the mouthpiece. So that isn't the problem. It's just feeling well enough to go out there and put joy into it. And how he does it, I don't know. He just gets up there like last night. It was earth-shatteringly good music last night. And it was all because of him at the helm. Yeah. I miss not working with him. Well, I'm looking forward to this gig coming up this coming Tuesday, because he'll have had a couple of days down here playing, and we're traveling the day before, so he'll be well rested.
Yeah.
And
Great.
And we got Bill Shaw up. Yeah. Oh, boy. Wow. Where did this guy come from? Well, I know where he came from. His father was Charlap, the writer, and his mother's Sandy Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking about the other night. I said, Sandy Dennis.
Oh.
Or Sandy Duncan, or so I forget. And Bobby was laughing at me. He said, no, you moron. That's, well, somebody. I know who she is. She's a club singer, good singer.
Yeah.
Did Broadway and cabaret, I think. Yeah. So he's on it, and that'll be fun. It's gonna be a nice gig.
Future's in some good hands there.
Oh boy, he's got a record out. He did The Man That Got Away. Ruby plays that too, so I'm hoping we'll play it. It's boo doo doo boo. It's as slow as you can get, and swings so hard. And he's just he's a real force to be reckoned with in this business. He's and I'm listening to him, and he's in his, I guess his early mid-30s. I don't know what his age is, but I was listening to a Jimmy Rolls record from the 50s the other day, when Jimmy would have been about the age that Bill Charlap is now. And you listen to Bill Charlap and you think, well, there's no way he can improve on what he's doing. But he probably will. Listen to what Jimmy Rolls, listen to Clark Terry from the 50s, and listen to the latter day Clark Terry, and how his style and everything about him at some point in the 60s or whenever it was took a quantum leap forward in all respects. He was always a great player, but he got considerably greater, and Jimmy Rolls did the same thing. And so I listened to guys like Harry Allen and Billy Shaw, and I said, there's no way they can improve on what they're doing right now, but who knows? I hope I stick around long enough to see what they both do. Harry's another one.
Yep.
He's just a phenom. So
I really do like listening to him.
Yeah. I have a CD coming out. We recorded it in Belfast in 1996 with Dave McKenna, Butch Miles, Harry Allen, and Howard Alden, and it's coming out in May. After 4 years, the record label gets in touch with me. They got to have the liner notes in 3 minutes. So I'm scrambling to write this stuff. And it's for Nagelhire, Sabina and Hans Nagelhire, who are good friends. But, once they decided to move on this thing, they wanted to move on it. So, all right, write the liner notes, send them to me. I'll type them up, send them back to you. You correct them and send back a final copy. And, so this was like the airwaves were cluttered for a few days. And so it's on the way out.
Great. Look
and Harry, well, that was 4 years ago, and Harry was just brilliant.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation.
I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
And I wish you all the best with your upcoming recordings and so forth.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure.